Guys, thanks for tuning in to watch the video. Just a heads up beforehand, we did this one through Skype and we had a lot of lagging and latency issues throughout the video. So there's going to be parts where, as you're watching, you'll see the screen just kind of freezes up and we'll kind of start talking a little bit over each other because of the lagging issues. So we're trying to find an alternative to Skype given quarantine. But in the meantime, that's what we have. But just wanted to give a heads up because it happened several times and it was frustrating for us on our end. So watching, I can imagine, might be the same too. Thanks anyway. Enjoy the rest of the video. So we're at Nova Lab Studios here in downtown. I'm with Natali Morris of Morris Invest. Thanks, Natalie, for being able to come on. So you're right now, you and your husband Clayton right now do videos through YouTube, right, on your channel Morris Invests.
We do, and we write books and do podcasts and blogs. And so, our main aim for any media that you get from us, whether it be a book or a course or anything like that, is to help empower people to take control of their finances inside their home and build wealth as a family business.
And what kind of led you guys to start doing that? Like when was that, after marriage you guys kind of decided to do that, or like how did that arise, that plan?
No, well, we thought when we got married, we both worked in news. We were
Mhm.
TV news anchors. I was at CBS and then I was at NBC, and my husband was at Fox. And we thought that we were always going to live our lives as media people, that we would
Mhm.
both just go off to our news jobs. And that's how we would raise our family. But we found that to be really tough with small kids.
Mhm.
And we didn't want to always be at the mercy of what the news producers or news directors had to say about where we needed to go, when we went to work, what we needed to look like.
Mhm.
It was a great job. It was really fun. But if you have small kids, you're very limited. My husband worked the weekends, I was working in the week. And then I left my job after we started to have kids, and my husband was working the weekends. And he had a great job, but we realized that we were really tied to being in New York. We were really tied to being the way they told us to be. And we would always wonder when time came up, are we still going to be able to live this life? Are we going to be able to raise our kids and pay our mortgage? And that's just a really powerless way to be. So we started to teach ourselves, how can we be in control of the money we make right
Mhm.
now? How can we break this cycle of needing to have the day job? And how can we build wealth as a family? So we started to study how to build our wealth together. It became like a team effort. We both found what we were good at, and we then decided to start investing in real estate. And there's a big learning curve to that kind of thing. Now we teach other people how to invest in real estate, but that's only one way to
Right.
build wealth. There are so many other ways. You can reduce the debts inside of your life, and that frees you, right, financially. You can learn to invest in something else, but really, you cannot save your way to wealth. And that's sort of what most couples do, is they say,
Mhm.
okay, we'll put this percentage in the 401k, or we'll automate some savings into the savings account. And once you really start to study wealth and take it seriously and learn to play to your strengths as a family, whether it's you and your spouse, you and your girlfriend, you and your boyfriend, you and your mom, it really doesn't matter. We all have some kind of wealth building partner in
Mhm.
our lives, or you can do it alone, but you still need a team around you. And so, what we want to teach people is, if you don't learn to build assets that you can live off of and not have to work a day job, you are not wealthy. You
Mhm.
can't be wealthy just because you have a big paycheck. Even people with big paychecks are not wealthy. You have to learn to build assets inside of your life. And that's what we teach people, is to take wealth building seriously as a job and apply yourself just as much to wealth building as you do to whatever other job you've got, whether it's you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you're a basketball player, whatever, right?
Mhm.
I don't know if I'm just looking at your shirt. Is that a basketball
Yeah, it is.
shirt?
Unfortunately, I'm not a basketball player, but yeah.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, it is.
That's where that came up. I wouldn't know that.
Yeah, yeah.
Even athletes are actually a really great example of this, right?
Mm.
Because an athlete, you think, oh my gosh, they've got so much money coming into their lives, but then like a great example of how that's not sustainable wealth is the movie Jerry Maguire.
Mm,
where the Cuba Gooding Jr. character is saying, like, how am I going to support my family, right? I have to make now what supports us through the rest of our life. And I remember feeling very stressed out in that moment because I was like, no one can do that. You cannot
mhm.
live on a nest egg. You
Yeah.
cannot, right? And so the banking products right now, when you watch commercials, would have you think that, oh, as long as my nest egg is big enough, I'll be fine someday. That's wrong. That's the wrong way to plan your wealth. And so we really learned that you cannot save your way to wealth. You have to learn to buy assets that perform, that you can live on right now. And we teach other people how to plan to do that. So we have a course that's aimed really at families, any family. It could be, like I said, you and your mom, you and your best friend, you and your roommate, you and and it's called the Financial Freedom Academy. And we teach people to learn to plan their wealth that way,
Mm,
not savings, not budgeting.
right.
Those are just sort of treading water type ways to think about money. We try to teach people this like empowering way because you have to get in the driver's seat of your wealth. So that's why we do what we do, and that's how it came about.
It's interesting that you mentioned the athletes, with athletes, because they have a finite window. So it is kind of to what
Yeah.
you're saying, because it's like even if you're one of the best players of any sport, you have between, let's say, 10 to 15 years, and you can obviously make a considerable amount of money depending on your level. But let's say if you're on like the lower tier, obviously you're still a very good athlete. But once that's done, it's like, would you go to a 9 to 5 now? If you haven't been responsible enough, if you haven't, invested into assets, if you've just been letting it sit, it's an interesting thing. Like there's like some 30 for 30 documentaries and stuff that kind of goes into it with how it is for athletes. So that's
Yeah.
a pretty interesting thing too.
I think it's I know there's one of the famous Yankee players, either Derek Jeter or A-Rod. I'm sorry, I sound so lame. Uh, but one of them actually became a real estate investor for this very reason, because he realized that this stream of income that comes off of my performance as an athlete will end. And I need to take this money and buy something that continues to perform. Right.
Right.
So I think it's Derek Jeter. I was checking to see if my husband's in the room because he would know, but he's not. I'm pretty sure it's Derek Jeter who owns a lot of real estate now, because you have to take this, the income you've got now. And I like to use the analogy of not a nest egg, right? A nest egg is just like one basket of eggs, and you're supposed to die when you get to the bottom. That is
Mm,
not what's building, right? I like to teach people to acquire nest geese, right? You buy a geese, that geese is going to lay eggs, and then you don't have to die, right?
mhm.
You just have to make sure the geese is in good shape. In this analogy, it's kind of an
Yeah.
everlasting geese, like the
Right.
geese die. But
Yeah.
the point is that you buy something you can live off of right now, either a
Mm,
business, a real estate investment, right? Because if you buy a nest egg, or a lot of people like to say, well, my nest egg is my house because it's appreciating. Okay, that's fine. One, appreciation is like poof, it could just go. We've seen that happen in how many like pandemics, market crashes, right? Okay, that's fine. But appreciation is still a one time transaction. That means one time later, I'm going to have a nest egg, a basket of
mhm.
eggs, right? It's a single transaction. And you can't eat it right now. You can't buy groceries with it. You can't put your kid in basketball camp with
Right.
that money right now, right? And so what we like to teach people to do is to acquire things that allows them to live their life right now. We call them performing assets.
Mm,
What do you have that performs, that will give you money to go live your life right now? Your 401k, that's not it. Your IRA, that's not it. That's for later, right? And those usually don't even perform in any kind of oppressive way. And there are high fees on those kind of things. So we try and teach people to evaluate what they've got and say, is this a true performing asset? Does it affect my life now? Is it building wealth for me now and in the future? Most people own nothing that qualifies as a performing asset. They think their house is, it's not. They think their 401k is, it's really not. So we teach people to build wealth that can affect their lives now. Because what's the point of having a nest egg that, one, you don't get to enjoy it until your kids are out of the house probably, and two, you have to die at the end of it. And so I think we really want to change people's paradigms about wealth building. So that's why we do what we do.
You were saying so you guys taught yourself what you know. Now
Yeah.
you're transferring it to others. So what was that process for you and Clayton? What was the when you guys were doing your research? Was it reading things? Was it talking to certain people? What was that process that accumulated this knowledge that you guys now have that you're passing on to others?
Books, mostly.
Books.
I'm a big book reader. And also, when we first started this, I was at CNBC at the time. And when you are at a financial news network, anyone who writes a financial book is going to send it in for free, hoping they'll get on the shows. And
Hmm.
so I would just go back to the free library and like take books off the shelves. Clayton's a big podcast listener. So he would put in a real estate podcast and go on walks around the neighborhood. Or I have memories of him like strapping our little babies into the Bjorn and mowing the lawn and listening to real estate podcasts. We just both like play to our strengths in that way. And then we started to really figure out who was good at what. And that's a big part of wealth building in your family too, because I really don't think that any one person can do it inside of a family. It's got to be a team effort. You
It's
both have.
difficult.
I don't understand those Real Housewife shows where it's like one person has a big paycheck and the other person just lives off of that in an extravagant way.
Mhm.
I don't understand it. I because the numbers just don't make sense for me for any one family to live that way. Um, Even like the Vanderbilts, right? They lost their wealth a generation because they had no participation other than the one person who had made that wealth, right? Um, and so I really believe that you need to find out what your strengths are. For me, I'm the spreadsheet junkie. For Clayton, he's the like real estate deal guy, and it works really well that we play to our strengths that way. Like I like to open a bank statement and read it and say, my husband will not. He'd like put it in a folder and not even open the envelope, if it comes in the mail. And I hate that. It bothers me so much. So we learn together to figure out like what are we good at, and it becomes like a really spiritual um endeavor as well, because you have to learn to talk about money with the person you love the most, and most couples cannot do that. And so that's also an important part of the process. You really grow together in that way.
Yeah, because if it's something that isn't really discussed, let's say in like in whatever relationship setting it might be, and then when it finally does come up, you might discover you're on complete opposite ends of the spectrum. So I think that's where it
Yeah.
plays into what you're saying about the team building. Because if your guys are so far off, then I feel like it's easier to be like, okay, so what is it about it that we agree on? What is it that we disagree on? Where we can kind of bridge the gap so that we can kind of get ahead.
Right. It's a slow process for anyone. I can't think of even one example we think of in pop culture where it was like they both just knew this is what we do, like, and
Yeah.
off to the races. Like for everybody, it's just how you have to learn to, it's a way you're learning to understand it, because the way you think about money is very formative from your childhood. And so, unless you're marrying a sibling, right, which is illegal, you have very different experiences coming up with money and how your parents talk to you and what you think about it. There are a lot of ways. For instance, when we got married, my husband, he is a shiny objects guy. He's like, let's get a boat. Let's get another house. Let's get this. Let's get that. And I was always like, why are you saying that? Where are we going to get that? What are you talking about? And for me, I just felt like it was so irresponsible that I would get mad.
Hmm.
And he sort of took it as, and so for me to say like, we can't afford that, that was very triggering for him, because he heard his whole life, we can't afford it. That's for other
Hmm.
people. We're not the Rockefellers. And so I was sort of making it worse in a way that I didn't understand in my reactions, right? And he was just trying to dream, and that really was upsetting me. Uh, And so we had to learn to speak to each other in
All
this
right.
completely different way. It's very funny, like these things you don't really understand until you start to think about them. until you start to understand where that person comes from, until you start to, I mean, they all say, I don't have no idea where this research comes from, but, there's that cliche that money is the number one cause of divorce or something. Who knows if that's even
Yeah.
true, but feels true because it feels like the thing that makes you so angry or mad or powerless. I mean, really, it's money is just a currency, right? It's just the currency that we use to run our society, but because of that, it's the currency under which you feel supported or you don't. And if you can't talk to each other about your own like supportedness or safety level, then of course you're going to fight about it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very difficult balance to try and strike. I want to backtrack. So you like wait like go to prior to your career started. So you went to school in California, right? You went to East Bay,
Yeah.
and then you were initially you studied journalism, right?
Yeah. My undergraduate is in journalism.
Was that like when you entered college? Did you already know I want to do journalism, or was that something like after maybe talking to people or taking certain classes you realized this is what I want to do"?
I can't remember, to be honest. I felt like I always was supposed to be a writer. That was my. I just felt very connected to that. Um, yeah, I felt like I always. One of my superpowers is taking information and helping to synthesize it for other people. So I didn't think that I was going to go into TV. That happened in a really weird way. I was discovered on a video podcast, and
Mm.
I think that I feel the most powerful when I'm writing, not necessarily when I'm doing video news or any kind of, broadcasting. I like it, but that's more Clayton's superpower than mine.
So when you weren't first discovered on that video podcast, and then whenever all the offer came about, do you remember the first time that you were on screen, how you felt like with a news with a news station? How was that for you?
Yeah, I do. Because I was impatient with it because I wanted to, I was used to, I sit down and I write. No one has to put a bunch of eyeliner on me. No one has to, I have, so I don't color my hair. That is hard to light if you have someone like it's hard to
Mhm.
because it's kind of shiny. And I remember it took so long. I was really impatient with it. And I was like, I don't think I want this because I'd rather just sit in front of my computer, bang something out, and then go. I took myself really seriously. I was like that scene from Talladega Nights where he was like, "What do I do with my hands?" It was like it was an odd experience, and then I just sort of like got better and better at it, and then I was recruited to go work for CNET and work out of their New York studios, and I was young and single and childless, and I was like, "Sure, I'll go do that." So I moved to Manhattan, and then a few months after I moved with CNET, CBS bought CNET, and then all of a sudden I was on broadcast news. So it wasn't
Mm.
like I I never really applied at any TV stations. I just was like this, you know, cute little thing who had a show on the web. Like I was one of the first video podcasters. And then all of a sudden they're like, "You're on the CBS morning show," and I was their technology reporter. So my first real TV job was in the network, was national news. I never did small market.
Mm.
In fact, my first what they call a live shot, where you're out somewhere and they're like, "Okay, let's go to Natalie. She's doing this thing." Like I really should have cut my teeth at small market, like podunk, middle of, America, small TV station. I had no business being on network TV. But I just was like, "Yeah, I'll do that. Sure, I'll do that." You know.
Yeah, that's a pretty unique path because you would think maybe a lot of people that are right now in news, like on TV, if you ask them, "Oh, well, how was it for you? How did you get to this point?" They might reference what you just says, like, "Well, I started at this small place, and then this one, and this one, and this one, and
My
then
husband
ultimately
did
came
that.
here." Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, there you go. So
Yeah.
that's a pretty interesting path. I would say probably like a unique way to end up like that to get to like your first one being on a broadcast news is pretty
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
So but outside of the things you mentioned, like kind of being impatient, getting worked on, all that, was it a fairly like a comfortable experience for you? Like it wasn't too weird?
No, no, I don't get nervous speaking in front of people. I did public speaking from a really young age because I
Mm,
was raised a Jehovah's Witness, and you have to give talks in front of your whole church
right.
and write them, and so I was always taught with that. I'm not still a Jehovah's Witness, but I do think that that gave me some great presentation
I'm
skills
sure.
because you have to start so early. I mean, you don't have to. I wanted to, you know. So I don't know. Maybe if because I wanted to, I would have. It just gave me the venue to
Right.
practice, you know. So I never felt nervous really on television. Um, no, that wasn't so much it. It
Hmm.
was, I mean, it was weird, because I was in New York City and you have people like putting a lot of hairspray in your hair and fake eyelashes on, whether you want them or not. And yeah, it was fancy, for lack of a better word. Like it was
Yeah.
fun because it was fancy. And sometimes when I look back and I watch some of those clips, like on a demo reel or something, you'll get to this point in your career where you're like, who was that? Did I
Mm.
really do that? You know, um, I don't miss it. I don't miss doing what other people told me to do, but I'm glad that I had it because, like I said, it was fun and yeah, it was fancy. It's something that, like, someone who hasn't seen you since high school and they say, "Oh, you're doing that." Like, that's kind of it kind of looks like an impressive thing, like
Yeah,
you've
I get
done
what you're saying.
with your life. So, in the end, and when I had kids and I had to think about whether or not I wanted to keep pursuing that career or not, I would get job offers and then I just couldn't do it. Like twice, I got job offers for some pretty good broadcast jobs, and then right when it got up to it, I was like, I can't leave my kids for this because we had enough in our family that we didn't need my salary. So if I'm going to leave my kids full time, right, then it better be something that I think is really worth it. And I knew at the time that it was only for me. It
Mm.
was just because I wanted to keep doing something that was fun or fancy. And I couldn't make that choice just to keep my mom would say, well, just keep your name out there. Like, this is the new iPad. This is the new Kindle.
Mm.
And I was like, I'm better suited to raise my kids to my standards
Right.
rather than going off and just like putting my face in front of a camera. And so I really was trying to find, like, I fashioned myself like a Rachel Maddow, like someone who really, I mean, I think her superpower really is synthesizing information
Mm.
and putting it out there in a way that's understandable. But I wasn't getting those jobs. I was getting jobs where it's like I said, oh, let me, cover WWDC or something. There's a billion people doing that, right? My kids have one mom, and I
Mm.
just I couldn't do it. Like I couldn't make that choice if it's them or the career. And I'm not doing something that's making the world a better place, then it was easy for me to walk away in that sense. And then when Clayton came around with this idea that we should teach other people what we had learned about wealth, that felt better to me. Like that is something I can do. That does make the world a better place. I feel very useful in that sense. So I don't miss that, like, I could see Denzel Washington in the makeup room, you know, or be somewhere that was like fancier but do something on TV that was stupid.
Right.
I would rather be here where I'm not fancy, but I am here with my kids. And I think my message makes a difference.
Yeah. I think to go back to what you were saying about like having people that can synthesize information, I do think you and your husband do that really well,
Oh,
especially with a topic like finance, where this is something like I've discussed with different people. I think is not taught nearly as much as it should be, just like from like schooling wise, for
No,
example,
not
like
at
just
all.
like base level. Like I'm not saying get crazy fancy about it, just basic personal finance. Given that I think a lot of people don't have that knowledge, whether it be because no one taught them or school or whatever it may have been. I think you guys distill it very, and it's very easy to digest and understand. It's not, it's you're. I don't feel typically that I get lost in what you say. I have a little bit more of a background in it, granted, but I still think you guys boil it down very easy. And now, especially the past, few months, like with all the stimulus stuff, for example, going on, I feel like Clayton breaks that down very well too. Like it's very easy to process information. Okay, so this is what that means. Here's when we can expect this, or you know, this is what the process is right now, where we are.
See him
Yeah. Uh,
right. Yeah, I'm sorry. But it's a trip to see him do that on his own terms because that's what he made his career out of doing for Fox News. And now he can do it in his own living room, in his own time. And no one is giving him a show rundown or any
mhm.
kind of way that the news should come across. And so he's essentially doing what he was always trained for, which was broadcast news, but for himself in a way that he was always, so talented in. So yeah, it's funny we have similar superpowers, if not a different style.
I think the other one of the other thing that's cool with, because you guys do live streams, especially now Clayton's been doing a lot of them more, but even before, like you guys would do them together, from what I remember seeing. I think it's pretty. I think what's different, maybe you can speak to more, at least from kind of what your guys' background was initially of being behind the camera. Now that when you're doing it directly like that, where it's like your own channel and you're doing it directly through YouTube, you see the engagement coming in immediately. So that's one of the things I find cool is like whenever, like recently, like when Clayton's on, like he'll put like a clock on until when he's gonna start talking. So like that first 5-10 minutes, he's just talking with the people. Like people are saying,
Yeah,
"Hey, how are you? I'm from here. I'm from there," and then he'll just kind of be checking in. For as a fan and as an audience member, seeing that from someone that you watch regularly, it kind of humanizes them, which is cool because you'll watch people in these settings and be like, oh, that's the guy on TV. But then when you have it, I think in this interaction, it's more like, oh, that's a guy, or it's a woman. It's not just some person behind the screen. It builds a connection, which I think would probably be a cool thing from that vantage point of your guys.
it's not
The last thing I
right.
want to,
It's like a
yeah,
democratized.
yeah, the last thing I want to close with you is, so this entire journey that you've had, for you, what was like the most difficult thing to overcome to ultimately get you guys here? Was it initially getting to the point of where it's like, well, now I have kids, do I make a decision of stay home or go to work, or was there anything else as well that you would say that was a difficult thing that you had to overcome that led you to where you are now?
Yeah, I used to think the decision to have kids and to leave network news was the hardest thing. But then we went into business for ourselves, and um, we had some legal issues with a partner that we were working with that um, ended up stealing from some people that we had referred to him, and we didn't know. And that it's not over, so I can't talk about it much. But
Sure.
when they're in legal battles, um, it's really heavy. Like if you are a responsible person, you don't speak about anything when you're
Mhm.
in a legal battle. Um, our current leadership would not show you that that's how you should be, but it is. It's that you take hits and you say nothing about it, and that was really tough for us to not just come out and defend ourselves. And also, when you're in business, you can't just leave your business at an office and then go home and raise your kids.
Mm.
So some of the hardest parts for me was when you get a piece of information that's stressful. It's not just like in your career where you're like, wow, things are not going my way. It's like something about my entire life is not going my way. And then your kids will say, can I have a cut apple with peanut butter? And you're like, that's really hard. I wish that on nobody.
Mm.
And anybody who's ever been in business for themselves and then tried to raise their children understands that you can't separate those things. And it's really hard to be a good parent and then like focus your attention when you're feeling stabbed all the
Mm.
time. And I don't have an answer for like how to go through that. But I think anyone who's been in their business and also tried to just be a person in your life, um, those things are hard. And so, even though we tell people you should own your own wealth, you should be in charge, um, you can't. Like you can't have the life you left behind. So if you're comfortable working for somebody and just leaving that at the office, you should not be someone who pursues your own wealth because then it's always going to be you. And there's no such thing as business, it's not business, it's personal. Because then when you own your own wealth, everything's personal.
Mm.
And so you have to prepare for that. And I'm not sure how good I am at it, but it's been one of the biggest lessons in life for us. And unfortunately, a really painful one. But it pushed us into some new places, which I am grateful for every day.
Yeah, I would think, with a journey like that, that's usually the ultimately the best positive outcome is that you made it through the other side of the fire, that you'll see it was very difficult and it was obviously not enjoyable, but made it through, and now we're here to be able to tell it and still help people in some capacity too. Sorry, we were having
Yes.
the
Yeah.
Skype would cut for a second, but
It's a bit that's okay.
yeah. But that's all I have for you, Natalie. I know we're at 12, so that works perfectly. Actually, somehow the timing worked out after all
Yeah.
the bugaboos from earlier. But I appreciate the time, Natalie. Thanks. I know we've been collaborating for a little bit, trying to find a time, so it was great to finally be able to do it and discuss all this with you. And it was cool to hear your backstory as well, and your journey to where you are now. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you for asking.
Of
It's nice
course.
to be invited.
Of course. Have a nice day.
Yeah, you too.
Bye.
Bye then.